Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1073. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, we're going to do some wild things in this video. We're actually going to build data extraction formulas, and we're actually going to see how to do it with the aggregate function, then how to do it with the small function. And I've done videos on those before. And then we're going to see how to do a data extraction formula with table formula nomenclature, which comes from an Excel table, which allows us dynamic ranges. Now, this setup here, here's months and amount of the contract, and we need to spread the amount over the months. Now, we just Mr. Excel and I did this formula in Mr. Excel and Excel is Fun trick number 152. But this is different. We have our data set down here. And this little data block, I copied it up here, just hard-coded it in. But it has all the years and all the contract types. Now, instead of separating them into 4 different tables and having only data for 2014 contract B, and then building a whole separate table, what we'd like to do is just be able to change the criteria up here and have only the one record from down in this table appear in this table. All right, so watch this. I'm going to delete because this is all the data. All right. What do we need to do first? Well, first we need to count from this table down here how many there are of a particular year and a particular type of contract. So we use COUNTIFS. All right, you ready? Now, the inside of this is going to be a lookup function. Now, actually, I want to be sure and select one that has 2, because here's the problem. When you go to build a formula to extract data, in essence, what are we doing? We're looking up 2013 in A. Well, check this out. 2013, there's one, and here's the other. There's 2 of them. Lookup functions can't deal with duplicates. So that's when you have duplicates and you're going to get data and display it somewhere, you have to switch over to an array format. Now, I'm going to start off on the inside of the formula and use index. All right, so we're trying to get months. So I'm going to highlight this column here. The array, those are the lookup values. And I'm going to hit the F4 key 2 times. So when I copy down, it's locked. When I copy it over to the side, this whole dancing ants will move to amount. Now, row numbers. If there were no duplicates, we just put the row number there, right? But there's duplicates. So we're going to, in this example here, use the aggregate function. Now, the aggregate is going to allow us to use the small. And by the way, functions 1 to 13 in aggregate cannot handle array calculations. Functions 14 to 19 can. And by the way, I have some reference videos over here. All sorts of amazing things that aggregate can do. This is a whole playlist of videos. We need small. Now, why are we using the small? Well, think about this. What are the 2 rows that have 2013 A contracts? It's not rows, because that would be 13. This is relative position 1 in the data set, and relative position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's why we need to use small. We need to get the first smallest 3. And then when we copy this lookup formula down to the next row, it needs to get the next relative position 6. Comma. Now, our array calculation here is going to involve errors, divide by 0 errors. So aggregate will allow us to ignore errors. Comma. Now the array. Well, what are we after? We're after relative positions, right? So I'm going to use the row function. And I'm just going to select the first column here, F4. Now, right now, if I highlight this and if I were to evaluate this and hit F9, that gives me 13 to 18. Well, of course, that's not what I want. Those are actual rows. So I subtract row. Now, that's an array calculation that return an array of items. But this one, I'm just going to say, hey, row 13, F4. Now, 13 minus 13 gives us 0. That would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to add 1 back in. Now, if I were to boop, highlight this and hit F9, boom, there's our relative positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that the small will pick from. But we need to filter out everything except for 1 and 6, Control Z. And the way you do that in aggregate, when when you're dealing with small is we're going to divide. All right, so you ready? I'm going to divide. Now we have two conditions, so I'm going to put two parentheses. 1, 2. The first one is going to be, hey, this whole year column, F4. Are any of you equal to 2013? Now, if I were to highlight this, not without the actually, I'll put a parentheses. If I were to highlight that, I'm having a hard time getting that parentheses and hitting F9. It gives me trues and falses. But we have two conditions, so we use Boolean multiplying. And we get our second set of trues and falses, F4. Anything in there equal to contract, whatever the criteria up is up in this cell, F4. Now, that'll give us trues and falses. Now, when we multiply them, only when it gets a true times a true will it deliver a 1. The act of multiplying Boolean values, trues and falses, converts them to 1s and 0s. So F9, there's our 1 for position, relative position 1, and another 1 for relative position 6. Now, why are we going to get a divide by 0 error? Zeros in the denominator, Control Z. All right. Now, let's highlight, boop, and F9. OK, so that means I forgot a parentheses at the end. By the way, yeah, we needed two parentheses because we needed to force this multiplying to happen before that division there. Now, when I click on this, boop, and hit F9, there's our filter. With aggregate, we're using divide by zeros to filter out the relative positions we don't want. In our next example with small, we'll see that we use the if, and falses will filter out the relative positions we don't want. Control Z. Now, notice that's an array with some numbers, comma, and as we copy the formula down, we want the first one, second one, third one. So I'm going to use my number incrementer rows. And rows is different than row. It'll tell me how many rows in a range. Now, I am in A5, so I'm going to type a $5 to lock that first 5, colon A5. The first 5 is locked. The second one is not. That's an expandable range. As we copy down, it'll give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, close parentheses on, that's closing on the aggregate, and then closing on the index for row number, and then Control Enter. Now, wait a second. Why do we use aggregate in the first place with this array argument instead of small? Small's been around forever, and it works in all versions because the array argument inside of the aggregate function can handle that array operation without Control-Shift-Enter. So I'm just going to Control-Enter. Enter it. Copy it over. And there's a problem there. Let's see what it is. Oh, I forgot to lock one of these cell references. So I'm going to come back here, F2, right there, F4, Control-Enter, and then copy it over. The rule there was I saw an error. I went to that cell. I looked at it, found what the problem was. Now I'm going to copy this down. We're going to get lots of nums down here. We'll turn that off. But look, it's working. It got that contract and this contract. Absolutely perfect. Now we're going to have to fix these formulas here, and then we're going to have to come over and fix that one. But no problem. We already have our fix here. There's a count of 2, so we want to tell our array formula when it gets past row 2 to show nothing. Now, this is important. This is an array formula. There's a lot of array calculations. Now, this is a small data set, so it doesn't really matter. But on big data sets, that's a lot of calculating to do. So the way you want to do this, you don't want to use if error. Because if error, sure, when it sees this error down here, it'll then comma put a double quote, which is show nothing. That's a null text string which shows nothing. But that means the index with all of its array calculations are going to actually run and calculate in every single cell. So the preferred way to do this, or the most efficient way, is to run an if. If there's a logical test that can avoid running the formula, let's do it. So I'm going to use rows of a $5 colon A5. Anytime that number incrementer is greater than our count of 2, F4, that means I'm past row 2. Then I want to go for the value if true, double quote, null text string to show nothing. Otherwise, run the formula. The beauty of this is when it gets past run 2, it is going to be not running this whole big formula. It's just going to be throwing a null text string into the cell. If error, that formula is running every single cell. You just, the bottom line is you don't want to use IFERROR even on small data sets because you don't want to get in the habit of doing that. All right, so that looks like it's working. If I come up here and click B, boom. If I come over here and click 2014, now we have to come over here and deal with this. Back in this video, we had a test. All we're doing is division here, right? So we had a simple test if the columns are greater than that. But we have a second test, because down here we need to say, are we past that particular column, which means 6, or is the cell here equal to a null text string? Now, this formula over here, in this range here, is automatic. So both cells are going to be delivering something. So we can ask the question of just one of these cells. But this is an OR. It's one or the other. So I'm going to use the OR function, open parentheses. I'm going to ask, is that equal to double quote, comma. The second logical test will be the columns. And then I'm going to close parentheses. This is not an array formula. I just enter it and then copy it down and over. Whoop. All right, so one other thing we could do this, we could add some number formatting there too if we want, but we could add some conditional formatting. I might want to see when I pull this data and spread the cost over the number of months, I might want to see the records down here. So I'm going to use conditional formatting. Highlight the active cell right there, Alt-O-D. Actually, the long path is home, conditional formatting, new rule. Alt-O-D, or in 2007 or later, it's Alt-H-L-N. And then we arrow, 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 because we want to use a formula to determine which cells to format. Tab, format cells where this formula is true. There's two conditions, and the first one is, notice the whole row. I want to format the whole row. So I'm going to ask the question of this first year cell, because the active cell is right there. So I'm asking, the formula we're building here is as if it's going to be put into this cell and copied over and down. So I'm going to ask the question of that. And we need to lock just the column, F4, F4, to lock just the column and not the row. The whole row needs to look at that cell right there. When you are equal to this year, locked in all directions. Comma, second test. When the contract type for this row, F4, F4, lock the column only. When that's equal to B, locked in all directions. Close parentheses. And then you can format it however you want. So now we can see our formula in action. That is beautiful. If I change to 2013, look at that. Now, here we used aggregate, which is beautiful because it allows us to enter the array formula without Control-Shift-Enter. Now, what would you do in earlier versions? Let's go over and look over here. Now, I have the same formula I just did there, and watch this. This is a cool trick. See the clipboard? I'm going to use all these same array operations. This is the one that gives us the array of relative positions. So I'm going to copy it in edit mode. I see it showing up over there. Here's the first logical test. Control-C, I see it over there. Here's the second logical test. Control-C, I see it over there. And I'm going to need this rows. I'm just going to click on the K and Control-C. We're going to use all those same pieces in the small function and if function. OK, so here, watch this. I'm going to click inside the index. Actually, it's the row number. So boop, I click on row number and delete. Now, I'm going to replace that aggregate in this row number argument with small. So SM tab. The array, well, I need to build that same array. Remember in the last example, it was divide by 0 and then the relative positions that matched. So here I'm going to say if. Build that same array. I'm going to say if. And I have two tests. I can pick whichever one. If function strung together, multiple ifs are and criteria. Both have to be true, so it doesn't matter which one I do first. There's the logical test, comma, if I do the second one, boop. So now we have two logical tests, true, true, but there'll be falses instead of divide by zeros. If that's true, what do I want? I want all the relative positions. Now I need to close parentheses when I see my screen tip back to array, I can click on it, hit F9, and boom, there's the filtered values. But instead of divide by 0, they're falses. Control Z. Now, I'm going to click on the K if I can. The array. No, I can't seem to click on it. OK, so I'm going to come right to the end, make sure that wherever my cursor is, I don't see it. So that's the wrong place. So I'm going to click in the next one. No, I don't. Let me use my arrow keys. Now, oh, I have to type a comma. I was being fooled there. Comma. And now I have my K. And I simply, boop. All right, I can see clearly there's not enough parentheses at the end. So I'm going to come to the end. Value of false is that whole index. Actually, we can go like this. The row number is going to be that. F9. Hey, it's a 2, right? Because the first record that matches. So really, that whole array calculation is just doing exactly what we said, delivering a row number or relative position to index. Control Z, close parentheses. And if I hit Enter, it's not going to work because this formula, the if function, logical test, has the array operations. Forget it. Anytime the if has these an array operation and logical test, you have to use Control Shift and Enter. When you Control Shift and Enter, you can see your curly brackets. Those curly brackets are put in automatically. Now I copy it over and down. And so now, if I'm in 2007 or earlier, that's the formula I would use. If I'm in 2010 or later, aggregate is absolutely the way to go. All right, now let's go over to this 173 table TFN, Table Formula Nomenclature, also called structured references, table formula nomenclatures, or structured references. I actually have some great reference videos. This video here has basically every trick I know about table formula nomenclature. And there are some real differences. So if I'm using this formula right here, I'm going to need to edit this formula to point to all these columns. But first, let's convert it to a table. And why? Because what if I add new records? If I convert this to a table, add table formula nomenclature to the formula, anytime I add new records, the formula will update. The new records will be displayed in the table. All right, so I'm going to click in a single cell, Control T to convert it to a table. My table has headers, and click OK. So we can see our drop downs. It adds some formatting. Immediately, when we want to go up to Design and come over to Table Name, if you do this a lot, it's Alt. And you can see the JT up there, JT, and then you see the A right there, A. So if you use a lot of tables, you always want to name them. So Alt JTA. And we're going to call this Contract Table, just CT, Enter. So now that table is named CT. All right, F2. All right, all of these cell references are not pointing inside the table. This one is. So I'm going to click on the array, type CT, and the table in the drop down is, you can see those are function arguments. The T, if it's a table, shows the table icon. I'm going to hit Tab. You type a square bracket, and that gives me the field names. So the column we want here that we're extracting from is months and then amount. So I'm going to type months and then close square bracket. Now, here's the strange thing about the default table formula nomenclature. When I copy this formula down, it'll be locked on that purple range, the month column. But when I copy it to the side, months will change to amount. So in essence, when you use table formula nomenclature arranged like this, the whole column, it's like it's mixed. Down locked, over the side it's not. Now we need to come over here, click on Reference. Same thing here, but for row, row can look at any one of these columns. It just needs to know how many records there are in the table. So I'm going to go CT, open square bracket, and then CU, tab, close square bracket. Now, when I copy the formula down, it'll be locked. When I copy it over to the amount column here, it'll move to months, which is fine. It's still counting the rows. That one's not going to matter. It's a single cell. Now this one is where table formula nomenclature gets strange. We need this locked in all directions. We already saw the default behavior for table formula nomenclature is mix cell references. So watch this. We're going to go CT tab, square bracket, and then we want to start. This is the year column, so I'm going to say year. Close square bracket, colon, square bracket, and then year again. Close square bracket, close square bracket. Now the whole time it was black, which is kind of annoying. You don't see that it's actually a legitimate reference until we get that color there. But there it is. That's how you have to do absolute. You have to say field in square brackets, colon, field in square brackets, all in square brackets. All right, so and then that cell reference is fine. This one right here, we're going to have to replace. This is the type. So CT tab, square bracket, type, close square bracket, colon, open square bracket, type, close square bracket, and now we can see that it is blue. All right, so that will work. This is the aggregate, so we just Control-Enter, no Control-Shift-Enter, copy it over and down. And now here's the magic. If I come to the bottom and in the last cell in the last record, hit Tab, Customer 7. This one is for 10, $4,440. And this is in 2014. And this is contract B. Now, I don't want to hit Tab because I don't want to add another record. I'm going to hit Enter. And sure enough, now it is dynamic. Conditional formatting is working also. All right, so we saw how to do data extraction formulas with table formula nomenclature. We saw how to do it with the small and if requiring Control-Shift-Enter. And we saw how to do it with the aggregate, the great Excel 2010 function to avoid Control-Shift-Enter. All right, see you next video.